issue. That issue is still before this House. There has been no hearing, and the bill that was put forth by the Republicans simply has gone nowhere. In fact, it hit the brick wall. And I'm sure one of the reasons it hit the brick wall is that there was no way to create a modern transportation system in that bill. For example, we both talked about streetcars and light rail cars. In California, there is a factory near Sacramento that makes light rail cars. I'm delighted there's a factory now in Oregon, Portland, that is building streetcars. And the factory in Sacramento is also building locomotives. The reason this is happening is that the Democrats, in the recovery legislation, the stimulus bill that gets such bad press, totally undeserved, I might add, actually had a clause in it that American taxpayers' money was going to be used to make it in America. And that started or propelled both of these operations as cities decided they would use some of their own money, some state money, and some of the federal money to enhance their public transportation programs. However, the transportation bill that you brought up just a moment ago totally removes the public transportation sector from the bill. Now, I don't know how we're ever going to build buses and trains and a light rail, Amtrak, without the support of the federal government. I know you were deeply involved in this. I heard you talk about this once before with a little bit of animation. You may want to circle back and pick that up again.
Well, I appreciate the invitation. You know, today, as we speak, people in Michigan are voting in a presidential primary to help determine the Republican nominee. I just mentioned one of them, my friend and former colleague here, Rick Santorum, with whom I served in the House, is the person who thinks it's elitist that American families have an opportunity for their kids to go to school. The other major contender, the gentleman who is likely to even win the ballot in Michigan today, more Republican votes, has been quoted as saying one of his top targets, if he's elected president, would be to eliminate Amtrak. You know,
Seriously?
Yesterday,
I've heard him say a lot of things.
Yesterday, he was on the trail. This is one of his top 5 projects, targets.
Is this Mr. Romney?
Mr. Romney wants to eliminate the funding for Amtrak. This is one of his targets. Well, you know, the United States is, well, in the past, I have actually been brought up short when I've talked about the United States having a third world rail passenger system. Because, you know, I've ridden railroads in places like Malaysia or Thailand, and we do an injustice to their rail systems. The United States is the only major country in the world that does not have higher speed rail passenger service. It is the only major country that has no plan to move forward. The President, to his credit, put forth $14 billion to be able to strengthen our rail passenger system, some of which, several billion, would have helped with the California vision. The California voters have approved and an opportunity to go forward. You know, it is frustrating for me because there is no doubt that Americans will have higher speed rail over the course of the next quarter century. No doubt. But the question is, coming back to the point that you have so relentlessly and eloquently developed on the floor here, Congressman Garamendi, is the notion of where will America's rail system come from? Because the path we're on, if we follow it with Romney, who would zero it out, with Republicans who have fought these investments every chance they get, the high-speed rail we'll have will be built and operated by the Chinese. They'll design it, they'll build it, the value will be added in another country, and we'll pay for the privilege. The alternative is to invest here in the United States in the tracks, the signals, the equipment to be able to revitalize a vital system of transportation, taking pressure off of airports and roads. But as I say, the choice is whether or not we're going to build it, we're going to own it, and it will accrue to the benefit of the American public.
Well, you're right on an issue that is very close to my own policies, which is if it's American taxpayer money that's being used to buy a bus, a light rail car, a streetcar, or a locomotive, or a train set for BART in California, or the metro system here in Washington, D.C., then our money must be used to buy American-made equipment. Plain and simple, those are American jobs. We had a terrible example of bad policy in California, the San Francisco Bay Bridge, Oakland-San Francisco Bay Bridge, a multi-billion-dollar project. The steel in that bridge went out to bid. It's $1 billion or so of steel for the bridge. One contractor put in 2 bids. One bid was 10% cheaper, and that was Chinese steel. The other bid was American steel, and it was 10% more. So the Bridge Authority, in its wisdom, selected the cheaper. Turns out that cheaper is not necessarily better, and ultimately not cheap it. It turned out that it was far more expensive. There were serious flaws in the steel, in the welding, and 6,000 to 8,000 jobs were in China rather than in the United States. Ultimately, the cost was higher, and we did not benefit in the United States, even in California, from the increased economic activity that would have occurred if the direct jobs in manufacturing and welding and fabricating that steel were in the United States. We don't want that ever again. If it's our taxpayer money from whatever source, then make it in America. Use our money to buy domestic-made buses and trains and steel. We've got work to do. I put this one up here not to get away from the transit systems and the public transportation systems, which are critically important, but we got 150,000 miles of road that need repair. The transportation bill that had been offered by our colleagues on the Republican side doesn't even get close to keeping up with what we need in the highway system and repairing the bridges that are falling down or could fall down across America. We have work to do. We need to reignite the American dream, and part of that dream has been the world's best transportation system. Unfortunately, over the last decade or two, we have seen that decline in American status in transportation. Whether we're in the third world or the second world, we're surely not in the first world for highway transportation or for the public transportation system. We have work to do to reignite the American dream, and this transportation bill that ultimately we must pass, the Senate and the House, we must come together and pass a bill that is adequately funded, that provides for public transportation as well as for the road transportation. Our Republican colleagues are not even close to that. They got a $75 billion hole in their wallet, not filled by the programs that have been put forward. I know that you've been serving on this committee. You're far more familiar than I am with it. So let's just continue with this for a little while.
Well, but this, one of your points about the impact of that one piece of the bridge project, the $400 million element of steel, it wasn't just the steel itself. Had we been developing that portion of the steel for the project in the United States, there would have been thousands of other jobs that would have been related to it to support that effort in terms of the manufacturing, the development, the people who provide the equipment to manufacture the steel and put it in place, and the tools. It is a dramatic ripple effect.